Hey guys, it's Jennifer Party, and I wanted to talk to you today about something that I learned about fairly recently in my astrological studies, and that also felt really relevant this weekend, and I never hear anybody talk about in the astrology community, and that is the moon being under the bonds. So there is an idea in traditional astrology that um, when the moon is within 15 degrees of the sun, and this could be like right before and after a new moon, so like the day before, the day after a new moon, but also the day before and after a full moon because it includes opposition. So when the moon is 15 degrees, within 15 degrees of conjunction or opposition to the sun, then it is weakened. Um, and the moon is held captive and constrained. She's under the bonds. Um, this is so interesting to me because prior to doing traditional astrology studies, um, I felt like I was always, mm, I would focus on doing like magic and intention setting at the new moon. And in the Wiccan community that I'm in, the full moon for Wiccans has always been a big deal, right? So you're supposed to do magic under the full moon. Well, astrologically, it's usually considered not auspicious to do any kind of magical working under a moon that is just new or full. Now, I don't think that means, it's never going to work or there's no good in intention setting or no good in doing magic. It's just that I think there are these challenges in negotiating a close relationship between the moon and the sun, essentially. And it's just really interesting to consider. Um, yeah. So I learned about this from my Demetra George studies. Her Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice, volume one was where I learned about this. And I'll read you some of that just to give you a context, and then I'll show you an example from this past weekend. Okay, so she says the astrological term bonding comes from the Greek word sundesmos, which means union, fastened, or that which is bonded together. It is sometimes used to refer to the conjunction aspect. Rhetorius tells us, so Rhetorius is fairly ancient astrologer. He's like late ancient astrologer, you could say, almost leading into the medieval period. Rhetorius tells us that the moon is carried under the bond when it comes to 15 degrees approaching the conjunction to the sun. It escapes or loosens the bond when it is separated from the sun by 15 degrees. Now, I looked this up in Rhetorius because I do happen to have compilation of his. And he says the moon is said to be brought under bond when it has become 15 degrees from the sun, and to unbind itself when, having passed it by, it is distant the same number of degrees from the sun. And this is also the case in, and this is also said in the case of the full moon. For being 15 degrees before the full moon, it goes into the bond, and having separated to the backside, it unbinds itself. He doesn't really go into that more. Um, But apparently, other astrologers talked about this as well, other ancient astrologers. I don't have those references with me, but according to Demetra, Paulus adds all the other aspects as well. I had forgotten about this until today when I reviewed. So sextile, square, and trine between the moon and the sun, but reduces the orb to 5 degrees on either side of the exact aspect. So that's something I'm going to have to pay attention to in everyday life, or just observing aspects between the moon and the sun. The moon under the bond of the sun is conceptually similar to a planet that is under the beams of the sun, where it's robbed of its vitality, because the sun shines so bright and it's, you know, um, it burns up the other planets, essentially. When the moon is under the bonds, there is a sense in which she is held captive and her significations are constrained, which is not good. We need the moon for manifestation. From the traditional perspective, it is a condition of debilitation and weakening. It is unclear from the text whether the 1 degree orb on either side, so in other words, when she's exactly conjunct or opposing the sun, gives her the protection of being in the heart, because that is a thing. Although the ancient astrologers recognized the exact conjunction of the moon with the sun within the same degree as a distinct phase in their cycle, signifying their union. I'm just going to read to you guys like 2 more paragraphs. Firmicus Maternus, another ancient astrologer, indicates dangers and illnesses when the moon is too close to the sun. Dangers and illnesses. The medieval astrologers said that the moon signifies secrets and hidden things when under the bond of the conjunction, and especially those things that we want hidden and concealed. When she moves under the bond at the full moon opposition, she signifies contrariety and its cause. Looking at the placement of the moon's domicile lord may give further information concerning what topics are being hidden, concealed, or are the cause of rebellion. Okay, and here's another key part. The Hellenistic astrologers paid careful attention to the arrangement of the planets when the moon loosened herself from the bonds. So when she escapes the sun, when she gets past that 15-degree mark. This happened when she moved 15 degrees past the conjunction or opposition. Exiting from hiddenness and captivity, she was in a weakened state and especially vulnerable to the first planet she encountered, bodily or by aspect. If the planet was benefic, she would benefit and be assisted. However, if it was malefic, she would be harmed. The situation was especially dangerous if she encountered Mars after loosening the bond at the conjunction with the Sun because of excessive heat with a waxing moon, or had an encounter with Saturn after the opposition to the Sun, excessive cold with a waning moon. This was a basic guideline in the analysis of the course of an illness employed in medical cathartic charts. Cathartic. I'm actually not sure how to pronounce that. Um, anyway, that's really interesting about the emphasis on illness. Um, it makes sense because we are concerned about the body with the moon. But again, to recap, when the moon escapes the bonds from the sun, when she's moved past the 15 degrees, you want to find that first aspect that she makes and see if it's a benefic or a malefic. And if she is escaping from a new moon, um, like just being within 15 degrees of conjunction of the sun, then it is especially detrimental if she meets up with Mars first. And if she is escaping from the full moon and she's waning, is especially difficult if she meets up with Saturn first. Because Saturn can be excessively cooling and she's already, losing heat essentially when she's waning. Okay, so now I'm going to show you guys or talk a little bit about what just happened this past weekend. And if you're watching this sometime in the future, you can just use this as an example. But this weekend, actually, I'll pull up the chart because I went ahead and prepared that. And you're only going to see the traditional planets since this is a traditional thing that I am talking about. Okay. So here is the full moon, Friday's full moon. And Friday's full moon was very close to Uranus, but since you're only seeing the traditional planets, you don't see that. That was definitely notable. It was near Algol and it was conjunct Uranus. But the other thing that is of note, I think, is that it was the same day that Saturn stationed direct. So very powerful station Saturn, Saturn announcing himself. Now, what we want to do is look, since it's a full moon, we're going to look um, at when the moon reaches 15 degrees past the opposition with the sun. So this would be when she hits 9 or 10 degrees of Gemini, basically. The sun will have, so we're going to move forward a day. The sun will have moved forward a degree. So we're going to look for about 10 Gemini. And I go forward a day. And a few more hours. Okay. So the moon is about to, it's almost 15 degrees past the sun. Now, the first aspect that she actually hit after the opposition with the sun was a sextile with Mars, but she was still under the bonds then. So then looks like the next planet that she's going to meet up with is a square to Saturn because Saturn is at almost, well, 12 and a half or 13 degrees, right? And the moon is at 10. So she meets up with Saturn. There, she's about to meet up with Saturn late Saturday night. Um, so I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but I really experienced this Saturn personally this past weekend. I was at a dance conference, a West Coast swing dance conference, and I sometimes suffer from issues with anxiety or sleep that, especially this year, have become kind of bad. And it may be because I have the moon around 15 degrees of Pisces in my first house, and Saturn has been applying to my moon. Um, but what basically happened is I was on Friday night, following the full moon. I had a lot of issues with anxiety and a sense of like panic and just like cold heat or adrenaline. Like I could not sleep. Um, and I ended up having to skip the dance conference and like sort of reset on Saturday the next day. I'm doing a lot better now. I was able to go back on Sunday. Um, and I don't think, I think even in challenging experiences, we can, find a silver lining. And I'm looking for that silver lining and just how to better take care of myself in situations that come up in the future. But it just really highlighted and drove home to me that this is a real thing. This is a real thing. The moon is vulnerable. The moon has to do with, well, I think in Vedic astrology, the moon is correlated with the mind, which is very interesting, but it's definitely correlated with the body. We look to the moon in traditional or Hellenistic astrology, to indicate if it might be an issue with illness. And I know some other people who were I talked to later who were dealing with Saturnian issues, shall we say, over um this past weekend, and some issues with either psychic disturbances, things that they were working out mentally, or physical challenges. So I think it's just something to be aware of that I wanted to share with you guys. So just to recap again, with the moon, it is vulnerable when it is close to the sun, when it's within 15 degrees of the sun, either by conjunction or opposition. And then you want to look at when it is moving past the 15-degree mark to see what is the first planet that it meets up with. Um, in this case, the first planet that the moon met up with was Saturn, and it was a square, and Saturn was in a superior position with the square. So Saturn had more power, essentially. Saturn had the upper hand, and he can extra damage the moon after a full moon. So Saturn can be really damaging after a full moon when the moon is waning. Mars can be especially damaging according to the traditional text when like after a new moon when the moon is waxing. So just watch out for these things. Yeah, like I said, jury is still out for me. I'm definitely I might get back to my like doing more intention setting and that kind of thing at the new moon or doing some Wiccan magic during the full moon. I don't think it's totally taboo. Um, and I'm not really superstitious about it. But I do understand that there's a certain kind of volatility there, right? And when we're considering about, yes, we all want to manifest things, like in a solar sense, we want to manifest things, but we need to like also take care of ourselves. And in order to manifest, we need to make sure we're in good condition, right? We want to take care of that moon and protect her from um too much heat and volatility and help her to ground and feel cared for and supported, essentially. So just something to consider. And wanted to talk to you guys about the moon under the bonds and share that with you in case you've never heard of it. Um, if you want to hear about more astrology stuff, follow me here. I do follow the Venus cycles and I'm learning traditional astrology. Um I've been doing modern astrology since 2009, but I'm more psychological astrology, but I'm enjoying learning traditional techniques as well. And so I am excited to share some of that with you guys. And yeah, so you can always follow me here for more. Maybe at some point I'd love to bring in some of my creative skills in addition to the astrology to share with you guys here, as I'm also a professional musician and I write poetry and so on. And would love to share maybe a lunar ceremony with you guys or something sometime. Getting back to that. But yeah, you can always reach out to me if you want a consult, and you can follow me here for more. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Um, oh, I will also say about the moon under the bonds that it is a condition that you can check for also in your own natal chart. Um, and it could be interesting to note if you were born within that 15-degree window of either a conjunction or an opposition. Um, if you experience either those hidden secrets, um, things being concealed under the sort of new moon under the bonds, or if you have that issue with the contrary nature between the moon and the sun, signifying contrariety and its cause, which is really interesting that we deal with under the full moon. Yeah. And you can also just see like, you know, um, like noting the aspects of the moon in your own chart, um, as well as observing the transits as they're coming up, I think can teach you a lot about yourself and a lot about the conditions in the sky and how to work with them, basically. Anyway, um, I hope you guys found this interesting, and I will be back with more stuff for you soon. And I hope you have a lovely day. The moon is much better condition right now. It is applying to Venus in an opposition, but it's still Venus, so that's wonderful. And it's a moon in Cancer, and it's a Monday. So, moon and Cancer on a Monday applying to Venus just sounds beautiful and like a relief after the Saturn business. So, um, I do think that some of that difficult aspect of Saturn could apply to the rest of this waning moon cycle, but I'm just wishing you guys um, perseverance and resilience and kindness for yourself and to others as you navigate your own challenges in your life and you know, stay supported. Find that support where you need it. And yeah, I believe in you. So love you guys, and I will see you again soon. Take good care of yourself.